Good morning, good day, everyone. Welcome once again to the Bible Beyond the Basics podcast. We are your hosts. I am Pastor Jason, pastor of Grove Presbyterian Church, and the pastor emeritus, Reverend Bob Andrews. We welcome you once again to our podcast. This is episode 20. How are you doing today, Bob?
Well, I am better now talking to you. I enjoy the conversation. A couple hours ago, it was pretty crappy, but I'll fill that in when we get to this topic.
Well, I thought I'd give you maybe a segue. I was talking to someone recently, and they had worked all summer. They're in a special kind of situation. They had worked all summer to get a job lined up for the fall, and everything had been lined up. It had all come together, and they've been doing it for about a month, and then just recently the whole thing fell apart. And now that it's past, like, a lot of that prep work was needed to do in the summer, and now it's hard to envision how that could happen again. And they called me and they talked to me and they said, what am I going to do? I thought that God was with me in all of this. I thought that God had led me to this, and now it's just broken up. How do I respond?
Yeah. Which is a perfect segue, as you said. Probably with the exception of the cross and resurrection, this little episode in Ezekiel 37 in the valley of dry bones, them bones, them crazy bones, is probably one of the most exciting, hopeful, encouraging passages in the entire Bible.
Yeah.
What you're reflecting on, geez, who? That's the discouragement people have been going through.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discouragement recently. Just with so many things, with all that's going on in COVID, with all that's beyond that, with just how much more difficult life has been these last few months and couple of years.
Yeah, and my daughter teaching out in Colorado right now, they're finally back in school because they are fully mandated masks, okay? Yeah. And that's how you do it. And I can get very annoyed at this point because of all the news and the fools that we're dealing with who are obstructing any improvement in the world. And I'm close to getting angry, but I'm trying to get beyond that.
So you have an opinion about this subject?
Oh, I do, because we need this kind of passage of hope. My daughter, what they've been going through, and they're finally back in school, and the struggles they're having with the kids going from screen time to class time, and the lost year of both maturity and content in literature and education, learning to write and read. And what these kids, you can't blame the kids. They've just been isolated. Another friend I bumped into, I may have mentioned this last time, I'm not sure, but he's a chaplain up at the hospital, and he deals especially with sick children, especially cancer children. He has an outmatched love for children, and just what he's seeing, the discouragement and the isolation, and he said it's never been the more despairing.
Well, alcohol and drug abuse is an all-time high. Depression is at an all-time high. The suicide rates, and it was when we went into this whole thing. There wasn't a lot of time to stop and prep and plan, and even I hear stuff around, like in our community in particular. It's hard to find enough psychologists to work in the area. We try to get people help, but sometimes it's difficult to do that.
And so many kids are detached from a faith-based grounding that and community that gives them the support and the love. again, we wander a bit like this, but I'm enjoying one of the joys of my life right now is my U12 AYSO soccer team that my buddy Frank and I are coaching together, and it's sort of like the Grandpa Brigade.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Lydia just got her first 2 goals the other day.
Oh, wonderful.
She's
Good
been
for her.
enjoying the program.
Good for her. Yeah, it's a joy. But the odd thing was where I was talking to the kids, I said, don't be like bees that all bunch. Be like butterflies that spread out across the field. He said,
Yeah.
oh, and this was a savvy little kid. He said, oh, like COVID, we can't be near each other.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I said, yeah, but on the other hand, boy, that really depressed me.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
so discouragement. Just talking to some of my own family members and some of the hard times they're going through, and going around to the different congregations and the struggles they're facing. It's sort of like my second career. It's almost turned out to be sort of handhold a lot of these churches that are really downcast and they can't find leadership. For me, it was, yes, I woke up fine. But then I opened up a credit card bill. And I'm going, this is 1,000 more than I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going, I can't take, and so how do you work through? My therapy was, I remembered a line, and if you'll forgive me for going on to a story, another story.
Yeah. We're all shocked.
A line came to the back of my brain. They said, "It is not a problem. We shall go to work." And I said, "Where did that come from?" And then I remembered. I wrote a story of a fellow I met in Honduras who became a good friend, Rafael, and his wife Maria Augustina. And in fact, it was so nice that Sam Ramirez from Grove and I got to visit him and stay with him at his house and up on the hill, Colonia Kennedy, Tegucigalpa. We went to his church, which was fun because it was pledge day. and so the pastor got introduced to me as the pastor, and so I got to help out with the pledge day in Honduras.
Of course, yeah.
And receive the pledges. It was just a joy. And Raphael was 5'4", scrawny guy, but as tough as nails. One of the workers for the Christian Commission for Development that we worked with, and we really, and he told me a story because he built his house up in the colonia, up on the hills of Tegucigalpa, and he married his wife. They were both 16. They had 3 kids subsequently: Olvine, Kelvin, and then Jonathan, Raphael, and then the hurricane hit. Hurricane Mitch, which they did not expect, but it was happening. And literally they huddled in their house on the slope of the hillside, one of the hillsides outside Tegucigalpa. And the rains were so torrential and gushing that it was eating away at the adobe wall, to the point where it ate away one of the walls and 2 walls fell in, and the whole family is huddling together, not sure if they're going to make it. And then the rain subside, and they look at and then they proceed to help out with their neighbors, getting them to rescue, going to the church. And Maria Augustina is just crying and in despair, huddling with her children. She looks to Raphael and said, "What shall we do?" And he looked at her and said, "It is not a problem. We will get back to work." And that gave me a kick in the butt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's 2 things that my wife and I tend to live by. We have just a couple of sayings, one of which is everything breaks. So essentially, at some points, everything we have is going to break, or in some way, everything could possibly go wrong. So, that's just something we anticipate, and it helps take the blow off of it. Lori's mom has a saying, if anything ever goes wrong, she asks, is anybody dead?
Okay.
And, generally, if everybody has survived the incident, then we consider it a win. So, and you can go on and such.
Well, let's just say, how do we recoup? Where do we find hope? And Now, as I said, I really think besides the cross, this is probably the most hopeful passage in the entire Bible. We've turned it into a song that was written, I think it was 1928, the first recording of it. It wasn't an ancient spiritual. It's actually fairly modern. But the black community that was suffering Jim Crow oppression and persecution. That was the other thing I shared with Milton yesterday. I got all these stories. I just discovered, I was talking about bigotry and millstones and how, I think the idea of Jesus saying we need to put millstones on certain people and throw them into the sea is probably a good idea. I'm getting to that point where there's some people I'd like to put millstones on because of what they're doing to kids in this country. But the notion that you have to be carefully taught. It's a song from South Pacific, the musical. You have to be taught how to be prejudiced and hate, and it's you're not born that way. You're born to love and be loved. I shared that, and I realized, then I did a little more research. Georgia legislators in 1929 tried to pass a law that would outlaw and ban the performance of South Pacific because they didn't like its radical message of love.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
But a lot of these stories, especially ones that you find in the New Testament, they were used during times of persecution.
Right.
For example, a number of the stories in the book of Daniel were written while people were in hiding.
Right.
Some of them were written as they were hiding in caves. They would write the inscriptions of the stories up on the walls, and they would tell them to one another. And we hear these stories and they just sound strange and outlandish, like something out of the book of Revelation, but they were meant to convey hope. Yeah. And that's what we find is the thrust of so much of Scripture. We need to ask ourselves the question, where can we find God's hope in this? And here in this strange story about this Valley of Dry Bones that I always thought was just perfect for Halloween messages.
Yeah, we're getting there.
But it is so hopeful.
Yeah. It's well, and the book of Daniel. Okay, just a little segue. The book of Daniel is purported to have been written during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. 400 plus 500 BC. No, actually, it was written probably about less than 150 years before Jesus. But it's a retrospective. It's as if predicting what's going to happen, and so therefore it's very hopeful, saying we're going to win, folks. We're going to hang in there. Ezekiel's much the same. It was written at a time when the people were in profound exile and discouragement. Is there any hope for us? We're being abused by our captors in Babylon. We once were a nation. We're losing touch with who we are. The kids are all drifting away. We're being oppressed here. We're slaves in a captive land. What's going to happen to us? And there's this wonderful description, vision that Ezekiel provides. And Ezekiel, by the way, is one of the first entrances of apocalyptic literature in the Bible. And the basically way I can describe that is, instead of storytelling or nice messages of prophecy, this is a video game. This is a dramatic illustration, presentation of the material. And that's apocalyptic literature. Apocalypse does not mean destruction. Apocalypse means a revelation. And they're dramatizing it with this incredible video game presentation of what's going on, as opposed to a still photograph. And so we get this Valley of the Dry Bones, Ezekiel 37, and the people are all scattered. They're dry bones. There's nothing left of them. It's desolate. Nobody cares. They're even unburied. And what happens? Oh, hear the word of the Lord.
Yeah. And such a strange thing to say to a valley of dry bones. And my Old Testament professor, Dr. Stephen Toole, he once time somebody asked him, why did he study the Old Testament? He said he studied it because it was strange. And they said, well, why did you focus on the book of Ezekiel? He said it was the strangest book in the Old Testament. But thinking about it in reality, it doesn't make a lot of sense. My atheist father-in-law, for example, would probably look at this passage and just say, this is just one of the many examples of the Bible not making sense, and that's why he can't read it. Or it's too, he doesn't, we've talked about this on several occasions. He doesn't handle metaphor well.
Right.
And so that can be a challenging for someone with like the mind of an engineer. Or
a third grader.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go. Can we go back to the original title?
I am not saying that my father-in-law has the mind of a third grader, but
the understanding of the Bible is at that level.
And I think that's just one of the things. It's part of it, him being unchurched. It's just the way that the Bible has been presented to people. It's just the way that people have said this is what the Bible is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's been really challenging for him over the years to try and approach it, just because of probably the hermeneutical angle that he has on it, though he wouldn't describe it in that framework. But the metaphorical implication of preaching to a valley of dry bones, mm-hmm. and telling them, here, come awake. That is just such a powerful imagery. And I agree with you. This is something that has stuck with me, mm-hmm. forever. Just such an incredible, grace-filled, gospel-centric sort of idea.
And referring to a people, not individuals. It's referring to a nation that is being raised up, put mm-hmm. together once again. I just reread Frankenstein. I'll get to that another day. And they're being put together, but also we tend to focus on the skeletons. And there was a great Disney. One of the first Disney cartoons was all the skeletons dancing. Sure. But we forget they actually get sinew. They become a people again. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, what are the people going to do mm-hmm. once they're put together? And that's the other story I had moving towards, for 15 minutes or so now, I got my watch back. I put the battery in. And the fellow who was really angry at God and yelling at God when he saw a little starving child along the street, and he was railing and yelling at God, why didn't you do something, God, to save this child? Why didn't you do something? And God didn't reply. God waited until the fellow fell asleep, and in the night he whispered in a dream, I did do something. I made you. What are the people going to do? Hope has to lead to work.
That's so powerful. It's, yesterday during my sermon, one of the things that I was talking about was how Christians can get involved with all these sorts of different fads, and they're like, mm-hmm. this is the next thing that's going to save us, or if we do this, mm-hmm. or if we do this. And ultimately, I was looking at Matthew 25, and the conclusion that I came to was, it's less about these fads that we can get involved in, but it's just about sitting down and doing the hard work of loving our neighbor. The whole thing in Matthew 25, did you feed Christ? Did you mm-hmm. give him a drink? Did you visit him while he was in prison? Did you clothe him? Did you look upon him when he was a stranger? All of those things require concrete action. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have to do something. Mm-hmm. So God gives us the hope to be able to get up to do the thing that we're called to do.
Right. And part of our dilemma in being a creature of the institution, one of my revelations, given the incredible opportunity that the church is facing these days, because we feel like dry bones today. I see it as an incredible opportunity, because we are finally beginning to realize that institutional fixes for institutional problems will never fix the institutional problems. Mm-hmm. We're really good at tinkering, but we're really not good at letting transformation happen.
Yeah.
And that's the secret of hearing the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
Ezekiel 37.
Well, you got anything else for us, Bob?
Oh, I got a lot. we got Jonah next week.
Well, we're looking forward to Jonah. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. God bless.